thank you very much for being here. Let me present. I'm Daniel Jiménez, coming from Madrid. I'm helping Nespon. And I have a very funny presentation, very different presentation. And I will try to entertain you and also try to travel to the past. Because the only way to understand the future is understanding the past. So let's start in 1945. What happens in 1945? The Second World War was already finished. And let me present to you to Vannevar Bush. Vannevar Bush was the scientific in charge of all the developments for the United States Army trying to fight against Germany in the Second World War. And this man was in charge to manage more than 6,000 different scientifics. And he was frustrated, already frustrated, because he says many times, we have many information, but we do not have knowledge. And there is a terrible problem in those times. The order that we manage the different books, the different research projects, and all the information was alphabetic or per classes, when the human brain thinks in association. So Vannevar Bush was thinking, we are thinking very bad how to approach the early frontier of the science, because I cannot repeat the same experience. We need to do something different. And Vannevar Bush, this is with Oppenheimer. If you see the film of Oppenheimer's, there is an actor doing the role of Vannevar Bush, is Matthew Modine. This is Vannevar Bush in the film of Oppenheimer that probably you will see. And what happens? He wrote an article in the Atlantic Review talking about the way we may think. And the way we may think is trying to make the information system, to convert the information systems, libraries, into a knowledge systems. And this man, in 1845, was trying to do the first hyperstate or the first World War Wide of the period was impossible. In fact, he designed a machine. The name of the machine was Memex. You will see later on the Memex, trying to build something similar to internet by mechanical aspects. And the most important thing on those times is, it doesn't matter the amount of scientifics, it doesn't matter the amount of information we have, we are not able as human beings to manage or to grow or to build knowledge, because it's impossible, terribly impossible. So this is the Memex. The Memex was an embed using microfilms and trying to do the same functions of hypertext by microfilms. But at least this is the first man in the history raising his hand and telling, we cannot work in this manner. Forget it, impossible. Encyclopedias are not anymore the device we need to use. 10 years later, happens something that, in my opinion, is similar with the artificial intelligence effect that we are suffering today or enjoying today. It's the reverse meteorite. The reverse meteorite started in Russia with Sergei Korolev. Sergei Korolev was the scientific in charge of all the spatial development of Russia. And he was in charge. There are many films about this figure, because this man was in charge to do the first Sputnik, the first travel of Yuri Gagarin or Valentina Koskova, the dog Laika, and so on. But something that changed the story of the world was that he was, in fact, specialized in doing rockets, mainly rockets coming from the B-1, the B-2, the B-3, and the B-5 of the Second World War, and he converts into R-1, R-2, R-3, R-7. This is the R-7. The R-7 was designed and prepared to travel with an atomic bomb. But Korolev convinced Khrushchev not to use this rocket to transport an atomic bomb, but to use this rocket to launch to the space the first satellite. And the first satellite was the Sputnik. What happens with the launchment of the Sputnik? With the launchment of the Sputnik, that was so simple. It's more or less like a basketball, 80 kilograms, and was 90 days doing circles around the travel. But the main effect that provoked is that the United States needed to react, because at those times, Russia was the first in the technology career, the first. All the newspapers were saying Russia wins the space, and Eisenhower needs to react. And the reaction, this is the world in two blocks of those times, Russia and the States. You can remind, because when we were kids, we were studying this kind of effects. And Eisenhower decides to do two things. First of all, to create the NASA and to launch the first man to the moon, but also to create ARPA in charge to develop that something that was ARPANET and 30 years later on was Internet. But in the creation of ARPANET, the network, something happens. At the very beginning, the scientifics were all belong to the university campus. They were all scientists, and they were trying to connect universities. But the program belongs to the army, and the army decided to contract Joseph Liquider. Today, Liquider is supposed to be the father of Internet. But Liquider was a physician, but also was a psychologist. And the army decides to put a psychologist to design the Internet. You know why? Because the most important thing that Liquider was describing is the interaction between the man and a machine. The same question that we have today. How to interact with the artificial intelligence, how to interact with the platform, how to enjoy all the developments we have today. If we don't evolve as a humans, we cannot evolve using different tools. And Liquider presented three ideas to the army. The first thing is to create a time setting. The time setting of a GM, because there was only one PC per university, probably with 3 floors, and the people were doing queue in order to do the queue to prove the time and to make the pilot or whatever the program in the machines. The second thing is to open the network. We need to open the network. And the name that he found was the Intergalactic Computer Network. It's a very marketeer name, but he was trying not to use only universities, to use companies, and also to use people. And the last thing is it not a question of computing. This is a question of sharing information. We are not sharing information. And Liquider, in 1962, wrote a very important article. I strongly invite you to read this article, no more than 10 pages. And the name of the article is The Man and Computer Symbiosis. In this article, Liquider says that we need to use computers to do formulative thinking, and we need to use men to do strategical and decision thinking. They need to coexist. But never, never, never the machine is gonna substitute the man. Never. That's not the idea. And there was 3 ideas at those times. The first idea is the mechanical extended man. The second idea was the artificial intelligence. We are talking in 1962, and artificial intelligence was already a concept. But the question is how to combine the attitudes of the man with the attitudes of the machine. In those times, there was not personal computer. Liquider was designing this and thinking this about the evolution of the informatics at home. 2 years later, he wrote a book named The Libraries of the Future, The Information Problem, and was redundant with the strategical thinking of Vannevar Bush, trying to find something similar to hypertext because libraries were not running. We need to substitute the book with a device. He was thinking in a smartphone because he was thinking that the computer in the future probably will be a communication device. He was describing a smartphone. Probably he didn't know, but he was describing the different functionalities and capabilities of the actual smartphones. Because in the end, it was a question of device. In those times, in the last century, the main question to advance was to find a device. Today, we are discussing platforms, we are discussing interconnections, we are discussing data, but in those times, they need a real device. And the device, where are coming the different devices? Let me present to you to Douglas Engelbart. Douglas Engelbart belongs to the team of Liquider, and he was 1 year before the launchment to the man to the moon, designing the first mouse. And he was doing the model of all the demos in 1968 because he was doing a video conference using hypertext and using the mouse. And he was doing this kind of developments, trying to extract the maximum potential of the talent of the people, of the students. This is the the record of the models of all the demos. You can find this in YouTube. I invite you also to listen to Douglas. This is the first mouse of the history, 1 year before that the men went to the moon. And this is Vannevar Bush today, showing the image that is something that we see romantic. But what happens today? Artificial intelligence is the new Sputnik. And let me explain why. There is a lot of history in the artificial intelligence. We could consider that artificial intelligence starts with Pascal. We could consider the Roomba the first device of artificial intelligence. We could consider many things. But if I were a journalist, if I were a people on the street, probably I understand or I foresee that this is a battle of two companies. Imagine, probably OpenAI or DeepMind. And probably this is not really true. They are already in the media all the days, on the TV, we could see, but this is not the real question. Because the real question is this. In 2016, DeepMind was able to win the world champions of Go. Go is much more complex than the chess, much more complex. There are much more many possibilities, it's so difficult, and this was a development, a game played in Korea, but the most curious thing is that more than 40 million of Korean people were following the 5 games on the TV, but more than 100 million of Chinese people were following this, and China was impressed with the capacity of the software, really impressed. For China, the effect of AlphaGo was the same that from the United States was the Sputnik. And China started to react. This is Kai-Fu Lee. Kai-Fu Lee is an expert, a Chinese expert that has worked in Google, in Microsoft, in many companies in Silicon Valley. Now he lives in Shanghai. And Kai-Fu Lee explains the different models that China has for developing artificial intelligence and the United States or the West has to develop the artificial models. And we could learn many things. For instance, this is a question of investment. And China has decided to invest more than the West or more than the United States. This is a question to have focus. Every year, China has many, many events like this talking about artificial intelligence in the last 10 years. This is a question of having a rocket. Do you know which is the rocket that China has? Why China is winning the battle? The rocket is a super app. WeChat, that belongs to Tencent, is the app that millions and millions and millions of Chinese people is using for doing WhatsApp, PayPal, Facebook, all the use cases you can imagine, Chinese people do with only one super app. That belongs the Chinese developers to have all the data in only one place, structured in only one way. This is something that in the West we do not have, because if we need to do the same, we need to orchestrate all these different applications. And today, this is an advantage for China. Also, the regulation system they have is much more aggressive than we have in the West. They can copy, they can eliminate channels, they can do many things. That means that the survivor is a real survivor. They are gladiators. They are not vendors competing. They are already gladiators. And now they have many, many, many companies doing many things. Probably they are 1 decade so far away from Europe, for instance. In Europe, we do not have this ecosystem. That's the reality. And finally, we need to discuss several dilemmas, so similar for those dilemmas that Vannevar Bush or Liquider has in the past. And let me explain the different dichotomies of these dilemmas. For instance, today we are living the narrow artificial intelligence, the narrow. We are in a very embryonic system. Probably in 10 or in 20 years, we will be talking about artificial general intelligence, or probably in the future, we will be talking about artificial superintelligence, the day that the machine is much more capable than a human being. But now we don't know when. Which is better to have? Data of algorithms. Because Chinese people think that it's much more relevant to have good data, enough data, than to have brilliant engineers doing algorithms, because in the end, the outcome resides on the quality of the data. It's something that we have been listening today many times. Other question, which is more important, to innovate or to implement? Because for Chinese people, to implement is much more relevant, because in the end, innovation is something that belongs to the West, that belongs to the States, but they prefer to implement massively. Which is more important, to have artificial generative intelligence or to have a lot of productivity with use cases? Which is much more relevant, to have a huge, enormous roadmap of functionalities or to have 2 or 3 strong use cases that are changing, they are game changers? Which is more relevant, to have niche or specialist artificial intelligence developments or to develop general in artificial? Or for instance, which is more important, to develop expert systems or to develop deep learning? To have very good programmers or to use platform to drive the code? To have focus on the conversation or to have focus in the atomization? Is the interaction with the user the leverage to scale the artificial intelligence uses? Which is more important, to regulate something that Europe is doing or to invest something that China is doing? Which is more important, to be immersive or to be isolated? There are questions, intuition versus logic. Which is more important, to have the answers or to have the questions? The knowledge or the data? To be collaborative or to be artificial? Is something relevant. And let me finish my last 3 minutes with closing questions regarding Salesforce. In 1945, Daniel Jiménez, in this article, The Way We May Think, describes a new job for the future, the trailblazers, those with the ability to imagine trails in order to do interconnections and to put together information, transforming information in knowledge. So Salesforce more or less was predicted by Daniel Jiménez or something similar. And if I may use 3 key pillars of the artificial intelligence doing questions to you, to your organizations, let me start with Alan Turing. If I were Alan Turing, imagine, who in your organization will be in charge to train the machines? Because somebody needs to do it. How are you going to elevate the way you train the people? Because we need to train the people differently, in a different way. If not, we will be losing the time. Or do you expect mechanical people or thinkers? And this is key question. Mechanical people sit down in front of the PC, make a question, and expect the answer, with no critical, with no rational behind. Thinkers try to exploit at maximum the capability of the tool. Today, we are more close to be mechanical, to be honest with you. Remind or review the way we work today, the way our teams are working today. If I were Isaac Asimov, will you have a unique, enormous central system like China has with WeChat? Or do you prefer an integrated ecosystem with external and internal biases? If this is the case, do you believe in a super app? Could Salesforce be your ecosystem? Has Salesforce today the capability to be this, with the capacity to interconnect with other external platforms? This is the main message we have listened today. This is my feeling, but this is an open question to you. And the last question, James Lighthill. James Lighthill was a mathematical doing developments of artificial intelligence in the 70s and in the 80s in UK. And this is the period that the scientists name it the winter of artificial intelligence, because they were trapped in no evolution. No money, no evolution, no use cases. This is the period of the winter of AI. Are you prepared in your organizations to prepare the artificial intelligence summer? Do you have money to invest? Do you know in what you need to invest? And it is worth to invest? This is the main question. So thank you very much for your patience, for your comprehension. I am on time, 10 seconds free. Thank you very much. And this is an amazing period.